The film begins in San Francisco in 1981. Chris Gardner, the protagonist, sells a medical device called the Portable Bone Density Scanner. Every day, he drops his son Christopher off at a low-cost daycare in Chinatown. Outside the daycare, Chris asks the janitor when he plans to remove the profanity written on the wall. He also points out that the daycare's motto has a spelling mistake. The word happiness is spelled with IE instead of Y. While waiting for a bus, Chris is approached by a homeless man who mistakes the scanner for a time machine. Later, Chris visits various hospitals, hoping to sell the devices. Because of this, he asks his wife, Linda, to pick up their son, even though she works double shifts. He needs to sell at least 2 devices per month to make ends meet, but hospitals find the scanner too expensive and unnecessary. Always in a rush, Chris parks his car outside hospitals, but can't pay off his parking tickets. Eventually, his car is towed away. That evening, during dinner, Chris notices a Rubik's Cube, a new toy at the time, gifted to Christopher by Linda's colleague, Cynthia. Linda asks if Chris has filed their taxes, but he admits he needs another extension, frustrating her further. After she leaves for work, Chris tries solving the Rubik's Cube, but finds it challenging. The next day, Chris sees a businessman driving a red Ferrari and asks about his job. The man says he's a stockbroker. Chris assumes it requires a high-level education, but the man explains it mostly depends on math and social skills. After this brief conversation, Chris wonders why he can't be as happy as others around him. The next morning, Chris tells Linda he plans to be home by 6 because he's applying for a stockbroker job. Linda mocks the idea, and they argue. She reminds him of their unpaid rent and insists he sell all remaining scanners. Chris heads to the brokerage firm but leaves his device with a street performer, promising to pay her more when he returns. He warns her that even if she steals it, she can't sell it. Inside, he meets an HR representative who gives him an application form and explains it will be forwarded to the main office. While talking, Chris notices the street performer running off with his device. He dashes after her, but fails to catch her when she escapes on a train. That night, Chris berates himself for losing the expensive device. The next day, Linda asks him to return without it, and Chris promises to sell it soon. On the way to daycare, Christopher tells his father about the daycare's misspelled motto. Chris also learns the children mostly watch TV instead of having lessons, which angers him. When he complains, the nanny tells him to pay on time or find another daycare. Later, Chris submits his application directly to Jay Twistle, the head of HR, but the conversation is brief as Jay is in a hurry. After leaving the office, Chris spots the street performer again. Following a tense chase, he finally retrieves his stolen device. That evening, Linda notices both scanners at home and grows more frustrated. She no longer believes in Chris's promises. She gives Christopher a basketball for his birthday, but makes it clear she plans to leave. Soon after, Chris catches Jay while he's hailing a taxi. He reminds Jay about his application and, seeing an opportunity, lies that he's heading in the same direction to share the ride. Inside the cab, Jay focuses on solving a Rubik's Cube, so Chris offers to solve it for him. To Jay's surprise, Chris completes the puzzle before they arrive, impressing both Jay and the driver. However, Jay leaves Chris behind, forcing him to pay the fare with only $5. Chris tries to flee but realizes he left his scanner behind. He runs back for it, angering the driver, who chases him. Chris escapes by boarding a subway train but loses the device to the same homeless man who earlier thought it was a time machine. That evening, Chris calls Linda to apologize for not picking up Christopher. Furious after missing her shift, Linda says she's leaving him. When Chris gets home, he finds Linda and Christopher gone. At that moment, Jay calls, asking him to note down his secretary's number for follow-up meeting. With no pen, Chris memorizes the number while rushing to write it down later, but friends distract him by talking about sports scores and debts he owes. The next day, Chris sees Linda after she drops Christopher at daycare. She says she's no longer happy, so Chris lets her leave but insists their son stay with him. That evening, he picks Christopher up earlier than usual before Linda can return. That night, the landlord demands rent, suggesting Chris move to a cheaper motel. Chris pleads for more time and offers to paint the apartment himself. The landlord agrees to give him 1 more week. While painting the next day, policemen arrive, instructing Chris to go to the station. He pays his parking tickets, but learns the payment will be verified the next morning at 9:30. Unable to leave, Chris calls Linda to watch Christopher overnight. The next morning, Chris rushes to his interview at Dean Witter Reynolds, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. Embarrassed, he explains to the panel that he was arrested for unpaid tickets. Despite his appearance, his communication skills impress the interviewers, and they even laugh at his honesty. Afterward, Jay congratulates Chris, but warns that the 6-month internship is unpaid and only one intern will be hired at the end. Chris hesitates, knowing the risks, but Jay encourages him to continue. Chris decides to try, relying on his remaining scanners to survive. That evening, Linda returns with Christopher, telling Chris she's moving to New York for work. Chris agrees, on the condition that their son stays with him. Tearfully, Linda leaves for good. After Linda leaves, Chris calls Jay's secretary and leaves a message. The next day, Chris and his son move 2 blocks away to a nearby motel with the help of Chris's friend, who still owes him $14. Since it's Saturday, Chris takes Christopher to play basketball before heading out to sell a bone density scanner. While shooting hoops, Christopher tells his father he dreams of becoming a professional player. Chris discourages him at first, saying he was below average in basketball when he was young, so Christopher might end up the same. Seeing the disappointment on his son's face, Chris quickly changes his tone, telling him never to let anyone say he can't achieve something, not even his own father. People who can't do something themselves want to tell you that you can't do it. If you want something, go get it. Period. Later, Chris sells a scanner to a hospital, finally earning some much-needed cash. When cashing the check, he lets his son buy a chocolate bar as a small treat. The next day, Chris begins his internship. The coordinator tells the group they must do whatever it takes to attract clients, have lunch with them, have breakfast with them, even babysit if necessary. Besides passing the exam, they also need to bring in contracts to be hired. During lunch, Chris meets Mr. Fr on the street, but their conversation ends abruptly when Chris spots a homeless man carrying the scanner he lost earlier. He chases after him, but ends up getting hit by a car in the process. One of his shoes falls off, and he has to spend the rest of the day limping around the city with only one shoe. The film then shows a series of moments where Chris is constantly ordered around by his internship coordinator, feeling underrated and underappreciated. Every day after work, he rushes to catch the bus by 4 p.m. to pick up Christopher, then takes another bus across town, often reaching home around 10 p.m. He continues struggling with rent payments at the motel. At the brokerage, interns work through long call sheets, starting from the bottom of company lists and hoping to reach top executives. While most interns stay until 7 p.m., Chris only has 6 hours instead of 9 because he must pick up his son. To save time, he never hangs up between calls, saving 8 minutes each day, and even avoids drinking water to cut down on bathroom breaks. After 2 months, he's still not through an entire call sheet. Frustrated, Chris breaks protocol and calls the CEO directly. Surprisingly, the CEO, Walter Ribbon, agrees to meet him in 20 minutes before heading to a football game. As Chris rushes out, his boss asks him to move his car. With no choice, Chris wastes precious time struggling with a car door, then drives his boss's car but gets stuck in traffic, ultimately missing the meeting. That night, he fills out a check to pay another parking ticket. Hoping for another chance, Chris convinces Christopher to accompany him to Walter Ribbon's house, hinting they might go to a football game. When they arrive, Chris lies about having other plans nearby. The strategy works. Walter invites them to join him in the box seats at the game. During the game, Walter admits he likes Chris, but says there's no chance he'll accept his offer. Still, Chris enjoys the opportunity to network with Walter's companions while giving Christopher a memorable day. 4 months into the internship, Chris has sold all his scanners, earning just enough money to survive. But the IRS freezes his bank account for unpaid taxes, leaving him broke again. Desperate, Chris asks his friend for the money he's owed, but the friend insists he already paid by helping Chris move to the motel. Frustrated, Chris argues until the friend slams the door in his face. Later, Chris spots the scanner he lost on the subway, retrieves it from the homeless man, but discovers it's broken. The hospital promises to pay once it's fixed. When Chris and Christopher return to the motel, they find their belongings thrown outside because they've been evicted. With no place to stay, they head to a train station. To lift his son's spirits, Chris pretends the scanner really is a time machine, claiming they must hide in a cave from dinosaurs. They stay overnight in the station bathroom while Christopher sleeps, unaware of his father quietly crying. The next day, Chris brings his suitcase to work, telling coworkers he's going on business trips to avoid suspicion. That evening, he and Christopher rush to a homeless shelter, barely making the 5 p.m. cutoff for beds. It becomes their routine, waiting in line every evening after Chris finishes work. He studies for his internship exams at night, sometimes under streetlights when the shelter cuts electricity. One day, Chris gives Mr. Fr $5 after the man forgets his wallet, even though Chris himself barely has money. That night, Chris and Christopher arrive late at the shelter and are turned away, forcing them to sleep elsewhere. To earn extra cash, Chris donates blood, finally buying the part needed to fix his scanner. He reassures Christopher that Linda's departure wasn't his fault, telling him to never believe otherwise. Chris repairs the scanner, sells it, and earns enough money to last them 4 more weeks. He takes Christopher to a hotel for the night, enjoying a brief escape from their struggles. The next day, they relax at the beach before Chris continues securing contracts with contacts he met through Walter Ribbon. On the internship's final day, Jay congratulates Chris in the restroom, saying he did a fantastic job securing clients. His words feel like a farewell, making Chris nervous. Later, Chris is called into the office, where Mr. FR tells him to wear his new shirt again tomorrow, because tomorrow will be his first day as a full-time employee. Overcome with emotion, Chris thanks them repeatedly, holding back tears as Mr. FR returns the $5 he had borrowed. Chris walks out, narrating that this part of his life is called happiness. He heads straight to the daycare, embraces Christopher tightly, and they leave together smiling. An epilogue reveals that Chris Gardner eventually founded his own investment firm, Gardner Rich, in 1987. In 2006, he secured a multi-million-dollar deal, fulfilling the dreams he once thought were impossible. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.